Amy looked at the sign across the parking lot and fidgeted nervously. It seemed to look back at her like a glaring eye, staring ominously in the distance. Even from the sidewalk, she could read it. The generic blood-drip font of orange and black clinging weakly as the wind tried to tear it away. Simply labeled Spooky Store, it barely covered the years of dried adhesive that had been collecting since before she was born. A rebrand of someone's bright idea that didn't make enough money and closed shortly after. It was the same old story that had played out for almost every other business that decided to rent a portion of the forgotten shell that had once been known as Bassmore Mall. She was too young to know the wide empty halls of the interior and the magic of penny fountains and niche shops, but old enough to know that the only thing that had survived the dead mall was a franchise gym and a rotating style of Asian restaurants. That, and the annual seasonal Halloween store. Growing up through the years, she would marvel at the signs through the backseat window, and every time her mother would drive a little faster until it was out of sight. She never understood her mother's distaste for Halloween, but more importantly, her hatred for that building in particular. It felt like she was being punished every year. The leaves would change colors, and her classmates would discuss their costumes, and she would be envious, knowing the only festive change in her house would be her mother drinking more than she usually did. No trick-or-treating, no cute costume, no candy. Only unspoken secrets, and the law that she was never to step foot within 100 yards of the mall, no matter who she was with. End of story. Amy didn't mind the ban at first. When she was a child, she would always get her fill of the season in the form of the little costume selection at Walmart and the same festive cartoons that played on cable each year. But as she got older, she found herself unable to understand her mother's unending hate for the holiday and borderline hysteric stress that exploded every time she asked to go to the Halloween store. Her mother kept many secrets. She never went into detail on why she hated Halloween so much, or why her father wasn't around, or why she always covered up the twisted scars on her legs, or why in the fall she would drink until she fell asleep on the couch. These were all things her mother assured her that she would learn when she was old enough. Lucky for Amy, amidst her mother's mysteries, the internet was more than happy to oblige her curiosities. A simple Google search provided more than she could ever ask for. An entire timeline of records that served as the legacy of Bassmore. Every store that attempted to put down roots, pages of failed hotspot restaurants, ambitious dojos, and clothing stores. There was even a Halloween store that had burned down. Some kind of tragic accident that made the news. Handy's Funhouse or something like that. She couldn't quite remember the name. Her hand felt around the case of her phone in front of her hoodie, and she pulled it out and unlocked it. No texts, no missed calls, and it was 8:45. The place would be closing soon. Come on, Chris. The lot felt too secluded standing next to the gym. Even at this time of night, she counted over 30 cars, which seemed off next to the almost completely vacant lot. The right side of the store was neighbored by an abandoned Sears garage. Just one of the things Amy discovered was a thing back in the day. The windows were busted, and she could faintly make out the outline of forgotten equipment through the garage doors. The longer she looked, the more it looked like something was moving around in there. Just as she was starting to get antsy, her eyes were pulled up and away by clumsy movement on the left, past the rows of parked cars. Someone was waving in front of the gym, a silhouette in the fluorescent glow that carried across the lot. Baggy sweatshirt, clunky boots. It had to be her. Amy started jogging across the lot, shivering against the cold that was wafting in. The person ahead kept waving, 12 inches of extra baggy sleeve flopping around as they did. When they finally spoke, Amy heard a familiar voice and finally relaxed. Hey, sorry I'm late. My stupid brother dropped me off at the pharmacy and my phone died, Crystal said, meeting her halfway. He's so rude. I wasn't sure if you were going to make it. They close in 15 minutes, Amy said, looking at the store. A couple was walking out, the boyfriend holding up a mask against the store's glow as he inspected it, like some sort of skinned human face. The girlfriend didn't look thrilled. Come on, let's get you in here before they close. My brother said he'd come get us in 20 minutes. Amy and Crystal hurried across the small lot to the spooky store, just as the couple started their car. Amy watched them pull away, their headlights cutting through the night as they left them alone in the lot with a single car remaining. She ignored the creeping feeling and focused on the door instead, and felt her stomach drop as someone on the inside was making their way to lock it. No, 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 no! Crystal shouted, throwing her hands up as they hit the entrance. Just as the guy inserted the key, Crystal started pounding on the door. He looked at both of them for a moment before giving an exaggerated sigh like he was dying on the inside. He pulled the key out and cracked the door just enough to poke his head out. Sorry, kids, we're closing. Come back tomorrow. The guy was a handful of years older than them, maybe a senior in high school. Can you please let us in, just for 10 minutes? My friend's never been in one of these stores, Crystal pleaded, motioning to Amy. The guy looked at both of them but didn't move the door. Your friend can come back tomorrow. We open at 11 and we close at 9, which is in 10 minutes. Besides, aren't you two a little young to be out this late? Where's your parents? They know you're here? Give you a permission slip? He teased, something Crystal's brother would say. Is that even a thing anymore? Come on, my friend's going back home tomorrow out of state. This is her only chance. We'll be quick, I promise. Don't be a boomer, Crystal said, and the guy sighed again. He looked at Amy and narrowed his eyes, taking note of her long black hair poking out from her hoodie. Where you from, kid? He asked, opening the door a little. California, Amy blurted the first thing that came to mind, fidgeting with her phone in her front pocket. They don't have Halloween stores in California? He asked, frowning. Nope. He looked at her for a moment before looking back into the store and groaning deliberately. 10 minutes, that's it, he said, opening the door and letting them in before adding, Please don't break anything, I already straightened up. We won't, Crystal said, leading the way. Amy felt a surge of both excitement and relief as they passed through the doors and out of the cold. The employee trounced back to the counter and leaned against it impatiently, scrolling through his phone in defeat. Inside the spooky store was pure magic. Amy marveled at the overwhelming festivity, the loud and vibrant assortment of costumes, figurines, and miscellaneous merchandise. The entryway was dominated by a collection of animatronics, each equally loud and intimidating. A bulbous-headed alien creature with glowing purple eyes that hummed as he held up a strip of human skin like a trophy. A large deer with flesh hanging from his antlers that would exhale smoke. A tall half-woman, half-unicorn covered in leather, chains, and blood. All the while, hyped up with the backdrop of recorded screams of agony. This place is so cool, was all Amy could manage in awe of it all. Crystal was already picking through a plethora of t-shirts, each covered in popular horror icons. She pulled away to gush over a plastic calico cat that would shine light from his mouth when he squeezed his paw. Yeah, it is. Glad we finally got you in here. Don't see why your mom hates it so much, Crystal said, leaving the cat behind after wincing at the price tag. Yeah, I don't know. She doesn't talk about it, Amy said, looking over the costumes. Inflatable hot dog suits, a bloated car salesman get-up with a blazer and sunglasses, a rubber horse mask with bulging eyes. Oh, hey, I'm gonna go check out the makeup real quick. Wanna come with? Crystal asked, toying with her pastel-dyed hair. Go ahead, I want to see the masks before I go. Meet you back here, Amy said, grimacing against the ear-piercing screams of the animatronics. Cool, don't get lost, Crystal said before hurrying away, her bulky boots scuffing the carpet. Amy navigated the store on her own with wonder, taking in every compelling prop and decoration. A stuffed swan with gore hanging its beak, a life-size dummy of a skinned man, standing next to one that had its mouth opened so wide that it ripped through its cheeks. There were so many cool and visceral things, but Amy could see it for what it was. Exciting, but harmless fun. No nudity, no vulgar language. She didn't understand why it took her sneaking out to finally experience it. In the back of her mind, she felt guilty for being there, an incessant nag that pulled through her excitement. But there didn't seem to be anything wrong with the place, and she started to wonder if her mother's hate from the place stemmed from some kind of superstitious illusion. Maybe she was just easily scared. She found a shelf of cartoony weapon replicas along the way. Reaper-sized meat tenderizers, anime swords, and bloody meat hooks. On the floor was a comical pair of oversized red plastic scissors about 1.5 feet in length. It had been ripped from its packaging, the little zip ties still clinging to the loops. Amy picked them up and closed the fake shears a few times, wishing she could buy them. She decided to hang on to them so she could turn them in on the way out. The wall of masks was just as cool as she hoped. From helmets to realistic animal replicas that had movable jaws, there had to be over 100 hanging on the wall before her. Amy whipped out her phone and stood back to take a picture, trying to get as many of them in the frame as she could. As the camera focused, one of the masks on the right stood out, one that looked much more realistic than the others. It was a child's face, with pale skin and horrified eyes, both hands clasped over the mouth like it was actually trying to suppress a scream. Looking at it through the phone, she realized it wasn't actually hanging on the rack, but staring at her through the glass behind it in the hallway of the mall itself. "Crystal," Amy called, the jolting feeling in her gut subsiding to the thought that she was probably just being pranked. Crystal had donned the mask and waited to scare her, for sure. But when she lowered the phone, she didn't see a little girl, only a large metal door. One that was hanging acutely ajar. Amy looked around the store and found herself alone. She looked for Crystal amongst the boxes of decorations and lights, and nobody standing between the empty aisles and old carpet. The makeup section had been empty as well. She found nothing around the packets of plastic eyelashes and fake blood pints. She even peeked around the animatronic display to see if she could see the employee at the counter, but he was nowhere to be found. "Guys," she called out, and heard nothing in return. No screaming sound effects, no laughter, and no ambience over the speakers. Everything had fallen suddenly quiet. Had they really left her there? Amy looked at the door and chewed at her lip nervously. She could just take a quick look and come back in. Maybe the employee had gone back there and she could chalk it up to a misunderstanding. She swiped out of the camera on her phone and checked the time. 9:56. "Crystal," she called again, and got nothing but silence. She sighed, took another worried look around the store and approached the door. Even ajar, the exit was heavy. Amy pushed into the hall, immediately aware of its vast liminal space. The air was cold, like she had stepped into a refrigerator. The tile reflected the same ambient light from the store, a faint glimmer that reached down the left of the empty hall until it reached the barricade of a scissor gate. The corridor was littered with a pile of old props. A melted mannequin with rusted chains for arms with a head that was too small. A realistic corpse wrapped head to toe in shriveled plastic wrap. A plastic unicorn with a broken stomach and singed mane. All of them watched her with blank stares underneath a film of dust from their home amongst the trash. Despite their uncanny appearance, the only thing that made her uncomfortable was the shape lingering on the right, positioned so it peeked at her from around the corner. The little girl with the horrified face, its little hands clasped over her mouth. Even in the darkness, she could see the haunted eyes, puffy and tortured. The child lingered like a cardboard cutout, her existence standing still like a copy and paste image, The more Amy looked at it, the more the pained eyes looked fake, until it started silently crying. Behind her, the metal door slammed shut. Amy jumped and tried the handle, feeling her stomach tighten when the hooked handle refused to turn. "Very funny, Crystal. Let me in." Her voice carried down the hall, a dying echo over the darkness that had overtaken the tile. With the door closed, it had gotten much darker, and when she looked through the little pane of glass, she started pounding on the door. Inside the spooky store, the lights were off. "Crystal!" Her throat felt suddenly hoarse, and her words came through a haze of fog. The hall was freezing, and she shivered in her hoodie. Clutching the plastic scissors, Amy looked down both sides of the hallway. She swiped down on her phone and clicked on the flashlight, but the shine felt useless in the vast corridor. Panning the light left, the minute glow cast over the barricade, causing a dance of shadows behind it. Shadows that seemed to turn and look at her. When she turned right, she caught a glimpse of the little girl and what looked like blood leaking from her eyes. Right before she slipped out of sight. "Hello?" Amy called, the phone shaking in her hand. She tried the door again, wanting nothing more than the joke to be over, and to see Crystal or the employee flick on the lights. But there was nothing but darkness. One that seemed to worsen whenever she wasn't pointing her phone at it. The absence of light crept around her, swallowing the air as it grew. Shivering in the dark, she looked through her phone to find Crystal's number. She hit the call button and watched it immediately go to voicemail. Instead of hearing Crystal's personal recording, she heard something else that made her sick to her stomach. "Hey, sorry I'm late. My stupid brother dropped me off at the pharmacy and my phone died." The voice distorted towards the end, Crystal's cheery tone warped by loud static. As Amy looked at her phone helplessly, a blood-curdling scream ran through the hall, one that was cut short by a sharp click, and followed by the heavy drip of fluid. The scream sounded like Crystal. Amy aimed her phone in the direction of it, her fingers wrapping tight around the plastic shears at her side. She saw nothing but the pale glow over the stretch of tile, the length of hall that seemed to shorten the longer she looked at it. Amy's lip quivered and her eyes welled as the realization settled in. The void closing in around her until there was nothing else to do but to go down the corridor. Her shoes squeaked on the tile as she started walking, heading in the direction of the scream. The light from her phone weakened the closer she got, and she found herself moving quicker because of it. By the time she made it to the corner, she discovered the sounds of her shoes and the huff of her own breathing had faded away, replaced by the loud chorus of what sounded like sobs. Children's sobs. As the light withered away, Amy stood at the edge of the corner, unable to bring herself to round it. She could hear breathing, a deep, bestial groan accompanied by a heavy beating heart. She could feel it through the wall, a heavy thump-thump that vibrated through the soles of her shoes. One that started to move closer. It came around the corner slowly, a twitching shape that failed to make sense under the dwindling light. Two twitching points were first, jabbing through the dark like a feeler. They were long and visually sharp despite the skin that had been stretched over it. A car's length of blades that closed slowly in a shrill drag of steel on steel. The body that followed was an abomination, a writhing mass of movement trapped beneath patchwork flesh. Multiple legs carried it, a mixture of humanoid, arachnid, and canine appendages working together like a top-heavy centipede. The monstrosity turned to face her, a prison of trapped limbs squirming against see-through skin and veins. The shears swayed above, connected by a scorpion's tail of twisted muscle and cartilage. Amy's phone grew weaker by the second, and she watched through the shaking as the living shears stopped their sway, pointing directly at her. The heartbeat got faster, louder, as the beast groaned. The stitches split vertically in a gaping maw of jagged teeth, a slow part that revealed a single glaring hidden eye beneath. Above her, the scissors opened wide, a horizontal guillotine that started to shake once it reached max capacity. Amy watched the eye, glinting, its pupil dilating as her light faded away and died to nothing. In the darkness that remained, she could feel its gaze, patiently observing her shuddering chest, her quaking legs, her fleeting hope. Then, all there was left for her was a long breath to feed a scream.